If you think that your voice doesn't matter, if you think your vote doesn't matter, you couldn't be more wrong.
Welcome to the Practivist Pod, the practice of activism made practical.
Today, as we have somehow made our way through the most horrific and disastrous first 100 days of any United States president in our history, we are going to focus on the top 10 wins we have had fighting back against this Trump regime.
And then we're going to get fired up with the founder of Moms Demand Action and always inspirational Shannon Watts. I'm Jessica Craven.
I'm Steve Pearson.
Hold on. Stay strong. It won't be long. Yeah, yeah. We will build a better world.
Happy Mayday to all of our listeners now. Maybe you're listening to this show on your way to a protest or on your way back, but it is a big day of protest. It's always a big day. You know, I've participated in the Mayday marches for my union siblings. I'm a union member. And this is going to be a big one. I'm looking for, as we're recording, of course, it's the day before. I'm looking forward to being in downtown LA. But send us your pictures at hello@practivistpod.com. We want to see you out in the streets.
Yeah, and also just a reminder that we are on Substack, and we'd be really grateful for your support there. You can sign up, and then you'll get an ad-free version of our show, which is really great for you and great for us.
It's win-win. Yeah, especially because there's a lot of ads. We're aware. So how are you, my friend? Here we have hit 100 days, and I know it's, you know, the shock and awe of it all is by design, rather. But it's hard to keep up with, and it's hard not to get emotional about. How are you doing?
Yeah, actually not too bad this week. I do feel, I don't want to say hope because there's just so much horrible stuff going on. It would be kind of inappropriate to say that, but I feel cautiously optimistic that we are at least hitting a new level of resistance, and that Trump is going into this week really, really a weakened president, and a popularly understood to be failed president, which is really helpful to our cause, actually. So that's how I am. How are you?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I looked at the headlines on the New York Times yesterday, which, you know, New York Times is spotty these days in terms of its coverage. But man, that front page was just slam after slam, you know, throwing down some facts about tariffs, about our economy, about his hateful and immigration policies, and the disappearing without due process of even American citizens, American children, you know, all of that. So it was pretty impressive. And so I did a sort of look at all of the major news front page for the 100 days. And it was all like that, with the exception of the places where I don't really go. You know, I'm hopeful too. And talking about what we wanted to do for this show, since there are many people laying out the lists of all the atrocities and lawlessness that we've seen over the last 100 days. Yeah. We wanted to lay out for our listeners. We can't do 100 because we don't have enough time on the podcast for that. But the top 10 ways that, you know, that we've really pushed back and made an impact, and it's important to celebrate those too.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there have been, yes, every lawmaker is standing on the floor of Congress and reading all the ways that he's, you know, busted the Constitution and broken the law. And that is really, really important. But right, if we don't stop and take a look at our progress, then what are we even doing this for? It's just, there's no point.
So let's get started with that. And this is really in no particular order. Frankly, kind of right off the top of our heads before we started recording. But
that's right.
Number one, the administration backtracking on pulling funding for the largest women's health study in our history at the NIH. I mean, the attack on women by this administration keeps getting, you know, more and more intense. And there was such uproar and upheaval over this you study. First of all, it's important to recognize, I know you know this, and probably most of our listeners do, that women's health is woefully inadequately studied. You know, men's health issues for decades and decades and decades have been, studied at a much higher rate. Black women especially have terrible outcomes when it comes to doctors, being believed by doctors, mortality rates, with pregnancies, and all of that. And so this is the largest women's study in our history that was being canceled by this hateful administration. And because of you, because of everyone making so much noise and all the uproar over this, they have backtracked and refunded that study.
Yeah, which, by the way, has been going on for 50 years. Like, it's so brazen and sort of, who does that? But yeah, no, you're right. This is a very big deal. And never say that your calls don't matter, because they just do. So yeah, that's a huge one. And then for number 2, we just found out this morning, this is on Wednesday, that the Columbia student who was arrested at his citizenship interview in Vermont, this is Mohsen Mahdawi, he has been released on bail. Now, his journey is not over. There's going to be a court case, but that is the important thing, is that he is getting a court case. He will receive his due process, which is accorded to every person in the country, not citizen, person. And by the way, he is a permanent resident. But this is a very big deal that the pressure works. And I would really like to shout out Representative Rebecca Balint. She's the Vermont congresswoman who has been working really tirelessly to draw attention to this situation and get this guy out. So bravo to her. And I'm just very glad to report that is the first of what I hope is many releasing of people who were unjustly detained.
Absolutely. Due process is back, everyone. Yeah.
Well,
it never should have left.
It's peeking its head around a corner, so it's a good start.
Yeah. All right. Number 3, I love this one. And that's that content creators and progressive media folks are getting a seat at the table. And if you have listened to How We Win from the last 5 years, you know that I have been beating the drum about how important it is to support progressive media, and how this alternative media ecosystem is completely dominated by right-wing voices. Yep. They just own the field. They own the space. We are not funded. We are not included. It has been very, very frustrating. And we saw the repercussions of that in this last election, where Republicans were very good at meeting voters where they are finding content and information. And we really fell behind in that. So they're taking notice. Everyone from the DNC to congressional members, they're opening up content creator war rooms. They're bringing people in, even giving them, funding them to come cover events. And, it's really exciting, because that's what we need. And as traditional media is really kind of over, it's definitely transitioning when you see the rise of all these great voices on Substack, and people having relationships, authentic relationships with people who are giving them news. It's really important that they're supported. So I think that's going to be a big game changer moving forward. I think that whole media, how media is owned by right-wing voices, and the conglomerates are owned by literal right-wing oligarchs. This has been a fundamental problem for our democracy and how we get our message out. So that's good news.
Very encouraging news, all the way from the DNC down to individual congressional offices to, private corporations, just everyone. It's a really encouraging thing. So, okay, number 4, Democratic lawmakers are really starting to find the fire. And this is another thing that you guys have been pushing for. Like, this is your effort that is coming to fruition. Just months of going, where are you? What are you guys doing? Some of them, like J.B. Pritzker, who had a really big moment this week, he's kind of been there the whole time, but he's getting more and more bold. I mean, the guy's about to announce, I'm sure, that he's running for president. I mean, it just seems like that's obviously happening, and great. But he's really not mincing words, and he's not the only one. We just have so many, we had another sit-in on the Capitol steps this week with Hakeem Jeffries, who I have not felt super great about, but he did this with Senator Cory Booker. We've got, tons of Democratic lawmakers getting on the road and going and doing these people's town halls all over the country. We have Bernie and AOC who, I don't think they did rallies this week, but in general have just been killing it with these rallies. And then you've got, Trump comes out yesterday and does this rally, which from my understanding had like 2,000, 4,000 people there. Whereas, they've been 30,000, 40,000. Right. So it's been our lawmakers, not all of them and not completely, but I think they're all trying. I think it's fair to say they're all really trying to bring it, ramp it up, think outside of the box, and it's making a difference. It's making a difference.
Absolutely. Cycle after cycle, year after year, the number one thing the Democrats want from their electeds is for them to be on the offense, is for them to fight and be vocal. And it's interesting. I was thinking about, I mentioned last week that I went and saw Jamie Raskin at an event, and he was talking about how much Congress has changed since even he was there, because a lot of Congress members are frankly wonky. They're policy folks. They don't come with an organizing background. And they come to take votes and to craft policy and do all that. And they're a little bit lost. They're not the ones that know how to be out there and really, rally a crowd. And Jamie Raskin actually has an organizing background and some of these other folks. But, we're going to have to be looking to our lawmakers to do more than be wonks. Unfortunately, they need to be out in the front, and that's what they're starting to do more. So I agree. And you mentioned Trump's, not so great rally. For our next number 5 is Trump's really not so great polling numbers. The worst of any president in their first 100 days in our history, which reflects the absolute horrific job that he's done in the first 100 days too. I can't even call it a job because he's not doing the job of our president. He's really, ripping our country apart and trying to be a king, and pull us into a full-on authoritarianism. But, Americans notice it's their own fucking fault. We've talked about this before. They have all the power. They have all the levers of government, and they could have gone through a quiet process to dismantle these agencies, to take away even rights and, whatever they wanted to do on immigration. They could have done it a very different way, and there was very little we could do to stop it. But because they had to be big, fucking, bold, stupid assholes about it and jump around on stage with a
chainsaw,
people have noticed, and guess what? They don't like it, and they especially don't like everything being more expensive when they voted for him to lower the price of things. So
and Americans, it turns out, they actually do like the Constitution. They do believe in it. They do believe in due process. So he's even underwater on immigration, because the way he's handling immigration is very blustery. But actually, I was just reading this morning, he has not deported as many people as Biden did in his final 100 days. So he's both doing these spectacularly unconstitutional, horrible, terribly cruel things and actually not being effective at what he said he was going to do, which I'm not personally sad about, because I think that, I don't want to see people who are, ffunctioning well and having good lives in our country just be sent away. But he's not even doing the thing he promised to do. He's just failing. So.
And people see it.
Okay, and then the next item, which I take personal pleasure in, as should you, because you and I have both attended a lot of Tesla takedowns. But I think at this point we can safely say that we've I don't want to say we've killed Tesla, but we have dealt it a fatal blow. Okay, I think we've killed Tesla, and I don't think they wholly understand that yet. They're still like, oh, if he comes back and focuses on the company, we're going to be fine. No, you're not. No, you're definitely not. The Tesla brand has been destroyed. And again, they did this to themselves. Those board members could have fired him a long time ago when he started being the person that he obviously is, and they didn't. They kept him. And now they're going to pay the price. That company is never coming back. And I say that as someone who will continue to work to make sure that is the case, as so many millions of other Americans feel the same. But also just, you can't do what he's just done to human beings and to institutions and things Americans care about so deeply, and then just come back. It does not work that way. Where brands are concerned, Americans have long memories. And we've killed Tesla. And that is something that the next company will think about before they decide to side with Trump. And I just want to congratulate you guys. Keep doing it, though. Don't give up. Keep going to those protests.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this is proof that, are attacking people where it hurts in their pocketbooks here. These corporations who are standing on the wrong side of history really does work. And we talked about this last week, I believe, too. But Amazon, Target, and now we're seeing Paramount Plus get a lot of blowback for their handling of the 60 Minutes. And
okay, wait. Does anybody subscribe to Paramount Plus? Do you subscribe? I don't. See, I don't. So I'm like, how can we punish them? Nobody uses them, do they? Or
well,
do they?
There is a subscription service for it.
Okay.
And so you can subscribe to Paramount Plus, or you can stream it for free and watch commercials like in the olden days. So,
well, if you have that and you're paying, you should unsubscribe. That would be
just an aside, not to get too sidetracked, but we watched the rehearsal, Nathan Fielder's show on Max last night, and he takes down Paramount Plus because apparently they removed an episode of his Nathan For You show.
Oh, okay.
That was attacking Nazis and was actually raising money, for causes for anti-Semitism and that. And they took down the episode because, starting from Paramount Plus Germany, because they thought it was too divisive.
Oh my God.
Or whatever. And so he does this incredible takedown of that, which a lot of people are saying anyway. But my larger point is it works, you all. There's been a lot of calls for a national strike and using our people power, and we're seeing that be effective. So keep it up. So number 7 on our list, again, in no particular order, you actually just told me about this morning, and I'm so thrilled to hear that the proposed autism registry has now been reversed. And this, again, really terrifying idea originating with RFK's, my bad, awful, not based in science, misinformation laden, attack on autism and the horrible things that he said about, people who have autism or families. Then they had the idea to do a registry, an autism registry, which is right out of the Nazi playbook, just to talk about Nazis again. The first thing that they did was making registry of, people with disabilities, quote unquote. I did air quotes for those of you who are listening and not watching us. So that, there again, because of the pushback, because of the outrage, because of the letters and the phone calls, they have reversed course on that. And thank goodness. And that is because of the work that you've done.
Yeah. So, that's amazing. And then the next one is judges in general. I just wrote judges in general. Our justice system, our judges, our judicial branch, aside from the Supreme Court, they've been just very moderately okay. Haven't had to do too much heavy lifting yet. They probably will. But our circuit court judges, all of our other federal justices have been truly heroic. Truly heroic. And, I'm starting to know their names. I was like, I never imagined I'd live in a country where I would know the federal judges' names just because their same names are coming up over and over again in these cases. And they're being targeted by Trump and by Musk and by all of, crazy Trump supporters. And they're just going, they're fighting, they're writing these eloquent decisions, and they are stopping. I don't know, what has he lost? 90% of his, executive orders have been thrown out by the courts. Like, he's batting whatever. I don't watch baseball, so I don't know how you would say it. He's batting badly. And this is something that we can look to. We've been so disappointed with our lawmakers, and they've been so slow to rise to the occasion. But our federal judges have not. And these are judges, some appointed by Trump, some appointed by Reagan, by Bush, by all different presidents. They are rising to the occasion. And this is something we should really celebrate. It's a wonderful thing. It may be the thing that saves us. So there's that.
I am very appreciative of the Mark Eliases and everyone who has been on the front lines, fighting for us here. And And speaking of folks who have been targeted and who are now banding together and fighting for us, number 9 on our list is universities banding together. And,
Yes.
This attack on education in general has been an effort by the Republican Party for decades and decades and decades. It's almost as if they want an uninformed electorate. I wonder how that could be. But higher education, the fuel of our economic growth and innovation and entrepreneurship, and if they want America to be leaders in technology and in new developments and in medicine and lead the world, then why in God's name would they attack universities the way that they have? But they have. And starting with Harvard, really leading the way then, and then the Big Ten universities banding together, and even Columbia, coming back to the fold,
creeping back, shamefaced to the fight.
Exactly.
After everybody stopped applying to their school.
Right. Yeah. Again, maybe we ought to be on the right side of history, and these universities understand the role that they play in our history, and so that's exciting. And they're suing the Trump administration and filing their own lawsuits, and it's I love to see it.
Yeah, and it's apparently a doozy of a lawsuit, and they've lawyered up in a very strong way. So good for them. When Harvard sues, they do it well. They're just Harvard. Anyway, and then the final one, you guys, is just you, the protests, our movement in general, the fact that I know I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that these Mayday protests are going to be massive. And the April 19th protests were huge. The April 5th protests are historic already. Like, people are now talking about them the way they talked about the Women's March. And we're building and building and building. And make no mistake that everybody else is deriving their courage and their fire from us, that we are setting the tone, that the grassroots is the one saying, do better, do more. And as they physically see us out in the streets, it gives them the courage to step up. And so this movement, the 50501, the Indivisibles, those of you who are with Swing Left or whoever you're protesting with, the unions, the teachers, we are making an enormous impact, and we're going to continue to. So just, remember that when you go out tomorrow. Remember that you are part of history, that this is what anti-fascism looks like right now, and you're doing it, and you're actually at the forefront. You're at the vanguard of this movement, and you should be extremely proud. And we are proud of you.
Well said. We are so proud of you, and I'm so honored to be in this fight with you, Jess, and with all of our listeners and everyone who is stepping up to do this very important work. And, we've said this before, but, our children and their children are going to ask us where we were and what we did during this moment in history. Yeah. And we're going to be able to tell them that we were fighting with all that we had. So, honorable mention, which we didn't even add. So I'll throw a 10.1. Canada. Good job,
my
Canada.
God, yes, Canada. How could we forget?
I just thought we got to mention that. I don't know if Trump deserves a good amount of credit for that liberal victory in Canada too.
It was like an in-kind contribution from Donald Trump to the liberal campaign. Honestly, yeah. They would not have won without him. We know this from looking at the polling before, and then the polling once he started attacking Canada. He literally won an election for a liberal in a country he doesn't even live in. It's a remarkable accomplishment, maybe his biggest accomplishment of his first 100 days.
I think it is. I think that's his biggest one. So
that's it.
Good job. All right. So before we go on to our reasons for hope, those were 11 reasons for hope right there. But I do want to talk about this week with our parent media company, MSW Media. We launched the Blue Wave Victory Fund for our California congressional candidates. And full disclosure, some of you may know that I'm actually the executive director of Blue Wave California. And this fund has what we call the Magnificent Seven districts. There's 4 that we need to protect that we just won, and 3 that we need to flip. We only need 3 seats to flip the House. And so it's a great thing to donate to, because it all goes right to the candidates, and then some of it's held into escrow for those flippable districts, and it will go to whoever makes it through the primary there. And I'm so excited to be partnering with our friends at MSW Media, because, that means we get to do maybe some live shows around it, which is super fun. I mean, any excuse to get up on stage and act silly. But also people, and I know they do this with you too, Jess, are constantly coming to me and saying, where can I make an impact? Everyone's asking me for money. How can I be strategic about where I spend my money? And this is a really good place to do that. So we'll put a link to that fund in our show notes, as we always do. You can also go to msw.bluewavecalifornia.org and find it there. Let's talk about our reasons for hope, and it's going to be a family affair this time. You have some family news to report.
Yeah, well, I do. I mean, I have a lot of family in Mike Lawler's district in upstate New York, and they have been, especially a couple of them, working very, very hard with a bunch of other people in that district to, first of all, pressure him to have a town hall, which for months they did that. They had the missing Mike Lawler posters they put up all over the district. They did an empty chair town hall, and that was a big success. So they've been pushing and pushing and pushing, and he finally agreed to do town hall, and it was on Sunday, and it was a catastrophe for him. And they forbade video. And they were strict about it. So one of my family members was threatened inside while, she was caught filming, of course. And they said, we're going to call the police on you. Like, it was ridiculous and possibly illegal for them to stop people in a public school auditorium from filming. But regardless, people filmed anyway. And he got booed almost the whole time. I mean, almost the whole time. And then at one point, they started chanting. It seemed very organically. He was answering a question about tariffs and trying to say how Trump's tariffs are really good. Blah, blah, blah. The audience starts chanting, blah, 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 blah. And it just gets louder and louder. And it was beautiful. And, became viral as another example of just Republicans getting chewed up and spat out at town halls. So bravo to everybody in New York's, I think that's 17th district. Really proud of you guys for the work you did there.
I love that.
And what's yours, Steve?
Well, I want to highlight my own mother-in-law, my wife's mom, and my daughter's Nana, who joined a group from her retirement community organized by Third Act. If you're familiar with them, you can find them at thirdact.org. They are a community of Americans over 60 who, well, I'll read from their website. Third Act is a community of Americans over 60 determined to change the world for the better. Third Act harnesses an unparalleled generational power to safeguard our climate and democracy. And so they went out to a Western Massachusetts Social Security office. She's in the Berkshires there in Massachusetts. And it was so great. She's 91 years old. Amazing. And she was out there protesting. She was featured on Rachel Maddow, which we were so excited about. Yeah. Senator Warren, her senator, actually used her picture in a post about saving Social Security. And if we'll show some pictures here on the YouTube version. If you're listening, just know that she is absolutely adorable and so joyful. And there's a picture of them all together. And there's a picture of her alone. And then there's a picture of my niece, who made the trip with them and brought her over there. So it's so great to see multi-generational engagement, like you said, in our number 10 of what is giving us hope and all the successes we've had. Yeah. To see people stepping up as a family together, multi-generational folks who haven't done this before but understand how important this moment is really inspiring. And I just love to see Nana's beautiful smile out there fighting for the rights, for her rights and for her grandchildren's rights. So
it's fantastic. So good. Please congratulate her. I feel like she's basically a friend of the pod at this point because you've talked about her before. So we're just going to call her Nana, friend of the pod. Is that good? Yeah.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully she listens. I know
Yeah.
she will. Okay. So that's a lot of great stuff. But we have more great stuff because we have an amazing interview with the always inspirational Shannon Watts. Shannon Watts is an author and the founder of Moms Demand Action, the largest women's volunteer organization in America. She's been named a Time Magazine 100 Most Influential People, a Forbes 50 Over 50 Changemaker, and a Glamour Woman of the Year. Her first book, Fight Like a Mother, How a Grassroots Movement Took on the Gun Lobby and Why Women Will Change the World, was published in 2019. And her newest book, Fired Up, How to Turn Your Spark into a Flame and Come Alive at Any Age, is now available for pre-order, releasing this June. Shannon, it's great to see you again. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. The last time I saw you, albeit briefly, was when you came out to help kick off a canvas for George Whitesides with a group of Moms Demand volunteers. He was one of the bright spots in a very dark election. How are you faring these days? You are no stranger to adversity, but are you finding time for yourself and your family? How's it going?
Yeah, I think you have to. I don't think you can be in this work. You know, I've been an activist now for about a dozen years, and I don't think you can do it without figuring out the balance of taking care of yourself and prioritizing yourself. You know, the work will still be there when you get back. And so I have come to see activism as a, marathon, not a sprint, but also as a relay race where you pass the baton to other people. And I was, very much in the thick of things, at least in terms of gun safety, for 11 years. And then I stepped back in 2022 and took a little bit of a break and got right back into it in a different way. So, I always follow the words of Alice Walker, the poet and author, who says, activism is the rent I pay to live on the planet. We don't really have a choice.
Absolutely. And that's, what I was going to ask you, because on the Practivist pod, we focus a lot on building resilience. And it's one of the reasons I was very excited to have you back on and talk to you, because the work we all do is really difficult, of course. But I would say the work of gun safety advocate is some of the toughest. I mean, the opposition is strong and very well funded. Legislative wins are slow and very hard to come by. And every day we're confronted with just a new heartbreaking tragedy around gun violence. And you have shown incredible resilience in this work, especially in the face of great personal threats too that you receive. So how have you built resilience in this work, both personally and as a leader in this movement? I mean, you talked about passing the baton and all that, but you have a lot of learnings from jumping in.
I was not an organizer, an activist. I knew little to nothing about gun violence or the legislative process, even when I started Moms Demand Action back in 2012, the day after the Sandy Hook school shooting. I was a stay-at-home mom of 5. I had taken a 5-year break from my career in corporate communications, and I was getting ready to go back into the workforce when this shooting happened. And I just felt this tragedy so viscerally, and I think so many women and moms did. I went to bed that night of the shooting just devastated, and I woke up enraged, like somewhere in the middle of the night, that emotion transformed. And I couldn't do nothing. I had to do something. For me, that was starting a Facebook page. I thought, honestly, this was going to be an online conversation about how women can come together and rise up against the gun lobby, just like women and mothers had so many other times in history. For me, I watched it happen in the 80s when Mothers Against Drunk Driving came together,
right,
and was so effective. And I just felt intuitively that women and moms were the secret sauce to activism. And what I thought was an online conversation very quickly turned into an offline movement, because women are the secret sauce of activism, because there was so much fear and anger around the vulnerability of our children and communities. And frankly, because these shootings had happened, everything from, Columbine to Virginia Tech to the Gabby Giffords shooting, and lawmakers had done precisely nothing. And so I, felt that this was, that the time was ripe. I underestimated, how successful and how rapidly we would grow, how successful we become. But resilience was, I think, due to several things. One is I felt passionately about the issue, and I felt, having started this, what I thought was a Facebook page that became an organization, I had an obligation to see it through. The other part was my lifelong untreated ADHD, which makes it a bit, I'm able to really hyper-focus on things for a very long time. For every day for 11 years, I woke up and really focused on this issue from the moment my feet hit the ground next to my bed till I went back to bed that night. And I attribute that to being neurodivergent, frankly. And then I think the other reason that I am able to be resilient is because I found my people. I found other women and gun violence survivors and people who were passionate about this. And when you find your people, you feel emboldened and empowered to be your best self, but also you feel an obligation to not let them down. And that is what kept me going for so long.
Yeah, I relate to so much of that. And when I consider myself class of November 2016. So when Trump was elected was when I turned my life upside down and started doing this organizing work. And, I tell this story a lot, but I opened up our home, my wife and I did, to a swing left meeting when they were first launching, and didn't see the box on the website where you could limit the number of attendees, and ended up hosting the largest one in the country. And all of a sudden, people were calling me saying, "I understand you're leading Swing Left in Los Angeles. Will you come speak to my group?" And it's the accidental activist kind of thing that happened. And here we are, and I really relate to finding your people, because that's what's so important. And it's been so great since COVID, obviously, and all the great digital organizing we've been doing to get back in person, in community with each other, because you really do find your people, and you find strength and hope in that community too.
Yes.
And that kind of goes to my next question, because in your book, Fight Like a Mother, you talk about the importance of showing up, simply showing up. And I've found that simply showing up is everything. And we're seeing a lot of new people coming to rallies all over the country, for the first time, getting involved in the Tesla takedowns and stuff like that. How do you encourage folks who are just starting to pay attention to get more involved?
The reason that the gun lobby, the gun industry, was able to activate this very vocal minority that really controlled the culture and the legislation and the elections around the issue of guns for so long was by getting people to act. And I tell this story because I think it's such a powerful example of why it is important to get off the sidelines. After the Sandy Hook school shooting in the spring of 2013, Democrats and Republicans came together to create something called the Manchin-Toomey bill. This was a bipartisan piece of legislation that would have closed the background check loophole in honor of the victims and survivors of this tragedy. And I was sitting in the Senate gallery in 2013 when that bill failed by a handful of votes in the Senate, including some of the Democratic senators who thought that if they did what the NRA was asking them, the National Rifle Association, that they would be rewarded, even though they were Democrats. And I can remember Heidi Heitkamp specifically said she was hearing from constituents 3-1 opposed to this legislation, and she voted against the bill, North Dakota. What happened next was that the NRA didn't, in fact, have their backs. They went in and invested in their Republican opponents, and every single one of those Democrats lost their job in the next few years after that election. And if you flash forward to 2022, when the next federal legislation came up, because of the work we had done, a quarter of the Democrats in Congress who had an A rating from the NRA in 2012 no longer did. In fact, 0 Democrats in Congress had an A rating from the NRA in 2022. They were proud of their Fs. In addition to that, Republicans were starting to see that they were going to get killed in the midterm elections if they didn't figure out a way to come to the table for this legislation. It was right after the Uvalde and the Buffalo shootings. And I'm pretty sure there was a poll circulating among Republicans that Mitch McConnell used to whip the votes. So 15 Republican senators voted for the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, the first federal gun safety legislation in a generation to pass Congress and get signed into law. And I can remember Todd Young, the Indiana Republican U.S. senator, said he was hearing from his constituents 8-1 in favor of him voting for this bill, right? So this is a very conservative senator in a very red state, and he did not have to vote for this bill, and yet he did. And that was the power of getting people off the sidelines to outnumber this vocal minority. By then, in 2022, we were twice as large as the NRA. We had 10 million supporters. And so if you think that your voice doesn't matter, if you think your vote doesn't matter, you couldn't be more wrong. There is strength in numbers, and it is on all of us to find a piece of the work that we're passionate about and to do it.
Yeah. I don't know who said it. Maybe you do, but history is written by those that show up. Right.
Yep.
And that lesson, I hope maybe the 10 Democrats that voted for the SAVE Act are listening to this right now. But I digress. Anyway, I want to talk about your new book. You're such an inspiration to so many, but especially to women that you've organized with Moms Demand Action, White Women for Harris, which was huge, and your work on the board of Emerge. Now you're continuing to champion and support women with your new book, Fired Up. Can you tell us about the book and Firestarter University?
Yes, I have worked with women for decades in my career and in my activism, and as I said, I stepped back at the end of 2023. I had done it for 11 years. I knew it was time to pass the baton, using the relay race metaphor, to someone else who had new energy and new ideas. And I really wasn't sure what was next for me. I kind of thought I might take a break. And I was running on a treadmill one night.
And the ADHD kicked in again,
yes,
right?
Precisely.
Yeah.
And I got a call from Maria Shriver, someone I didn't know, but admired and respected a lot. And she said, I have a book in print. I would love for you to write about what you've learned about women. And I thought, well, first of all, that is a very big topic, but also, when will I have this kind of opportunity again? Of course I will do that. And so I spent the next year thinking about what I had learned, processing it, realizing that, I had followed this formula to figure out kind of two things in my life, what was calling me and what was limiting me and how I could move forward, right? There's this formula for what I call living on fire that I've seen in my own life and in the lives of other women that I've worked with, where it's they bring together their values, their abilities, and their desires, and they really become unstoppable. And I interviewed 70 other women and just found all of these same traits in women who were living audaciously. And it was that they were constantly asking themselves, what do I want? And I think in society, women are often taught to fulfill their obligations and men are taught to follow their desires. And just imagine if women live their lives that way, constantly asking themselves, what do I want? And we don't not do that because we're weak. It's because we're wise. The system is sort of set up to either hold us back through blowback or different extinguishers that help steer us back to those obligations. Because, if women did what they wanted, if they followed their desires, governments would fail, systems would fall, family systems would crumble. Society as we know it would change significantly. And so that was really what I wanted to encourage women to do, to help summon their audacity, to give themselves the time, the space, the community to figure out what lights them up. I don't want any woman to get to the end of their life and feel they didn't burn.
Yeah. And obviously this movement that we're all involved in, anywhere you go, in democratic circles, resistance groups, marches, rallies, everything, it's led by women. It's led by older women mostly. And it's something that I reckon with and to try to get more men involved in this work. But I did source some questions for you from my wife, because, of course, my lived experience is different than yours and hers. And there was kind of two things that she mentioned that she was just curious about your take on. And one is the culture of competition that often exists between women. And the second one, we're all around the same age, is now that we're living longer, in this maiden mother crone transition, there's actually a bigger gap between mother and crone, where women are looking to expand their lives in new ways. So can you speak to that gap and also the competition of it all?
Yeah, the first thing I would say about competition, I think this is something that society sets up. We talked about those extinguishers, the blowback that we all face, women face, when they decide to put this formula in place, when they marry their abilities, desires, and values, and also that they kind of set these obstacles up in their own minds too, right? What is societal or systemic becomes internal. I interview a woman in the book who calls it CIYOO, complicit in your own oppression. And we start to believe these things. We start to believe that there is a scarcity. We start to believe in this hyper competitive capitalistic model that has been laid out for us. But the truth is, and I have seen this firsthand in my career and in my activism, women, when they come together and they are collaborators, they are unstoppable, right? And I talk about how, hundreds of years ago, women were arrested for gossiping. This idea that we're sharing information and we have whisper campaigns because that's how we collaborate and communicate. And we were punished for that. And I think that still lives inside us, right? This desire to be on top is what we're taught. And so what I encourage women, and I've seen it again firsthand, is that when we make space for each other, when we realize that there isn't scarcity, that there's enough for all of us, and that we all have different sets of values, abilities, and desires, and we have the ability and freedom to explore them, especially in community, that there's much more harmony and there's much less desire to be competitive because we are together as opposed to being sort of pitted against one another. So that's the thing I'd say about competition.
I think that's a lesson just for social society in general, when we're constantly looking at, not all of us, but when many, especially Republicans, are looking at us as like a zero-sum game and otherizing each other and in competition, and not understanding that when we support each other and give opportunity to each other, we're creating more opportunity for us all. So.
Yes, I agree. And that's not to say we can't call each other out. And that's not to say that politics, doesn't require sometimes sharp elbows. But I think specifically around women and competition, that is sort of a societal obstacle that we have to work to overcome in order to support one another and to have women have more access to the levers of power in this country, right? So no wonder we feel like there's scarcity when we only hold 25% of the 500,000 elected positions, when we're only 5% of the Fortune 1000 CEOs in this country. There is a little bit of scarcity there. And when we lift one another up to get to elected to office or to succeed in the workplace or to follow our personal desires, it changes. And it's not going to happen overnight, but that's a practice and a discipline that we all have to work on. And I have a whole chapter in my book about a bonfire. And that's really when women bring their individual flames together and they create these amazing communities. You were talking about the Zoom that I organized for white women answer the call for Kamala Harris. That was to have a conversation about, do white women understand how to come together in community? Black women do because they have had to in order to survive. And there is a different dynamic in the community of particularly white women. And so that's a whole other discussion we could unpack and probably talk about for hours. But I think the fact that we're finally having that conversation is monumental. But I want to also get to what you asked me about, this idea of the mother and the crone. We are in a whole new generation. My mother was expected to disappear when she turned, 40, 45 years old, that she was no longer relevant. She was no longer desirable or attractive. She should sort of, retire to the sidelines.
Right.
And that isn't the case anymore. I am 54 years old. I feel like I'm just getting started. I didn't figure out what lights me up until I was 41 years old. And I think it'll change, right? I went from starting Moms Demand Action to writing a book. I'm taking courses in genealogy. I'm traveling. I'm doing all these things that other generations of women were not able to do. And menopause is no longer the end of our lives. It's really just the beginning. And again, if we ask ourselves, what do I want all along the way? That means that once, if we have kids, they leave the house, we have a whole new chapter of our life to start. As I mentioned, I interviewed over 70 women for this book. One of them was the poet and author Sandra Cisneros, who said, I am in my 60s and I still don't feel like I've written the best poem or the best book I'm going to write. I feel like I'm preparing for the end of my life, and that is giving me all of this wisdom that I can access and improve my work. I love the story of a woman I interviewed named Carol Frick, who wanted to become an author. She ended up becoming a phys ed teacher because it paid the bills. She retires and goes to volunteer in an animal shelter, and she comes up with this idea while she's there of a couple falling in love at the animal shelter. She doesn't know how to write a book, so she goes home and teaches herself every night how to write dialogue, how to create a book. And then she writes the book and she decides, I'm valuable. I have these values and these abilities and these desires. I don't want to self-publish. I deserve to be published. She sends the manuscript to 218 publishers and gets rejected 218 times. On the 219th time, she gets a book deal and becomes a published author in her 70s.
Amazing.
Those are the stories. We hear so much about what women are doing right now, the amazing things they're doing. I wanted to talk about the how. How can we emulate these women?
I love that. That's so valuable. And we need to flip the script so much in our country. We talk a lot, rightly so, about the deep roots of racism in our country, but the misogyny in our country and the patriarchy is even deeper. And as a man I'm 53, I'll be 54 next month. I'm constantly told that I'm in the prime of my life, that I'm in my prime years right now.
Did Don Lemon tell you that?
No, I did hear that. He didn't directly tell me that, but these are the messages that men get in their 50s. Yes. And so I love that you're giving that message to women as well. And so anyway, thank you. I know you don't have a lot of time left, but I do want to ask you the last question that we always ask everyone, and that's what's giving you hope right now?
I am so hopeful for the women I see stepping into the gap, becoming a bulwark against authoritarianism and at all levels of government. I really think there's a moral imperative right now for women to run for office in this country. I don't care if it's, county coroner or sheriff or city council or school board. It's really important that we step up. But even if that's not the route, that you want to go, my book really is about how do you bring new energy or more intensity to the things you're doing? How do you create and be open to new experiences and relationships? And, that might lead you to do extraordinarily ambitious things. It might compel you to finally just act on ordinary things that are meaningful to you, but they're all daring. And I think this gets back to that conversation we're having before. When women are allowed to pursue their desires, it creates a virtuous circle. When we figure out what makes us come alive, we not only improve our own lives, but we're more likely to improve the lives of others. And that might be starting a movement or speaking up in the workplace or, just taking up the space you deserve or running for office. And so I'm incredibly hopeful that women, will read this book, that they'll summon their audacity. And I know that the world and our nation needs it now more than ever.
Love that. The book is available in June, but it's available for pre-order right now. And Shannon, it's so good to see you. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
So, Steve, I understand that we have some calls again, that people called our 818-824-4286 number and left us messages.
We love that so much. Thank you for calling in. It is so inspiring to hear what you're doing out there in your communities, and it just makes us feel really good. And I know it makes all of our listeners feel good. So we have 2 calls that I want to highlight. The first one is coming to you from maybe it's not South Philly. Let's play it. Suburban Philadelphia. Let's play it.
Hi, I love the Practivist. Thank you for keeping us a little pumped in these really challenging times. A group of us here in Mount Airy, which is a very crunchy neighborhood of Northwest Philadelphia, decided that we want to host a weekly resistance rally. It's a long way to go to the downtown rallies, and the Tesla takedowns are almost an hour away. That's a lot of driving time. We'd rather build our own local resistance community for people not wanting to go so far away. We are going to have a singing for sanity weekly resistance. We're calling it We the People Wednesdays. Our first one is April 23rd. We're featuring local musician song leaders singing protest songs at the beginning and at the end. And then we'll have a local inspiring speaker talking about all the national crises. We're not going to run out of crises or speakers. And then we'll have action items with people helping people write postcards or submitting forms, addressing and mailing things, all the practical things that we are more inclined to do if somebody is guiding us and other people are there doing the same thing. So we're really excited. We have a website. Anybody around the country can take the idea and run with it. There are musicians everywhere. There are inspiring speakers everywhere, and it just takes a little effort to pull it together. But everyone is so excited to be doing something. We the People Weds, WEDS.org. We the People Weds.org. Bye.
That is incredible. That is the grassroots at its best right there. It's fantastic. And I really recommend that people think about setting something like that up in their own town. That's just great. And you will make friends. It will be great.
Absolutely. And, look, marrying art and music with activism, that's a tale as old as time for a good reason, because the artists are movement makers. And not only does it bring joy and community together, but it can break through the noise. It can break through preconceived notions, so I love all of that. And then we got another call, this time actually from a Michigan state representative, Carrie Reingans, and I hate to put her at the very end of the show, but she's a really awesome person, and I think we'll invite her to come have a more of a conversation on our show soon. But here's the message that she left us.
Hello, this is Michigan State Representative Carrie Reingans, and I am in my community sounding the alarm about Medicaid cuts and how they may end up closing rural hospitals, nursing homes, community health centers, mental health services, and people don't seem to know about it. So I'm sounding the alarm, giving people tools, telling them what they can do to fight back and talk to different congresspeople across our state. I just today introduced Michigan's Medicare for All bill, because once the whole entire healthcare system crumbles, we got to start over, and I know the way we got to start is by having Medicare for All, be it at the state or federal level. Thank you so much for all that you do and helping all of us find a way to find some hope and keep taking action. Bye.
Wow, that's awesome. Fantastic.
I'm a big Medicare for All fan. I've been pushing for it here in California, our version, CalCare, and couldn't agree more. And this is really important. Also, the work that she's doing. I love that she was literally out telling people, about the threat to their health care. And she's like, I'm going to call you guys from the car and let you know what I'm doing. But this is what we need to do because, and I think it's very simple. The message is very simple. Republicans are taking away your health care. It can be as clear and simple as that, because that's really what it is. These cuts to Medicaid and Medicare will affect everyone, and we've talked about it a lot, but people don't really know. They don't understand. And when they do and do hear about it, of course, healthcare should be a human right. We should all have access to quality healthcare in, what is supposed to be the greatest country in the world. So thank you for calling in, Representative Reingans, and of course we'll have her on for a deeper discussion on a future episode.
Yeah, we should. That'd be great. Thanks for calling, you guys.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Don't forget that all of the links for our actions and the organizations that we talked about are in the show notes. So don't just listen, click those links and take action. Please do subscribe, rate, and review our show on Apple, YouTube, or wherever you find yourself listening. And share our show with your friends and family, and make sure they are taking action and joining in on these marches. If you are able to support our show on Substack, we would be very grateful for that. And added bonus, you will get an ad-free version of our show as well. As we said, it's a win-win. We will be back next week with some more Practivist Pod. And until then, don't forget, hope is an action.